Simon Kennedy is the newly promoted Shadow Assistant Minister for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy and Scrutiny of Government Waste. Simon Kennedy, welcome to 7:30 and congratulations on your appointment.
Thanks, Sarah.
Opposition frontbencher John O'Doniam joined Andrew Hastie. This morning he said there would be a, quote, mass exodus from Shadow Cabinet if the coalition supports net zero at any cost. What does mass exodus mean, do you think?
Oh, look, I spoke with John O just shortly before this interview and, I think the key thing he said is net zero at any cost. I think in the coalition, people believe in reducing energy costs. We believe in reducing emissions. Just yesterday, Mike Henry, the CEO of BHP, who also has committed to net zero and believes in climate action, said the cost of energy in Australia is 2 to 3 times that of our competitors. 2 to 3 times. So I think what you hear from Andrew, I think what you hear from Jono is a rejection of what Labor is using a net zero target as a distraction from their lack of policy and policy failures. Because right now, Chris Bowen promised $275 off energy bills. They're up $1,300. He promised emission reductions. Well, the truth is Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison all reduced emissions more than Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese.
All right, let's get clear on your position.
82% renewables, they're nowhere near it.
Let's get clear on your position. I'm glad that you checked in with John O'Doniam what he meant when he said that. But from your position, do you support net zero by 2050?
Yeah, I support net zero as a target, but frankly, it's a target, not a policy. It's a distraction. What we should be doing is saying they're about to legislate the worst government on emissions in 20 years. I don't think people understand. Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen have reduced emissions less than Scott Morrison. They've reduced emissions less than Tony Abbott and Malcolm Turnbull. We are entrusting the worst government in 20 years to reduce an emissions target. And while they haven't reduced emissions, prices are up 40%. So
All right,
I think what you hear from the Liberal Party, we're having the debate the Labor Party should be having.
That's quite all right. Let's go to the coalition policy because Andrew Hastie was very clear. He said that he'd quit if the policy went ahead. There were no caveats, no inclusion of the term at any cost. He just said he would quit. The question is, can Susan Lee's leadership survive this public destabilisation?
Look, I sort of reject the premise of that question because I think what you hear from Andrew and what you think from Jono, he didn't speak about Susan Lee, he didn't speak about her leadership. What Andrew is talking about.
Do you think Simon Kennedy, that the leader of the opposition welcomes this public debate about net zero on the week where the news poll found the lowest score ever for the Liberal Party in its polling? Do you think she welcomes it?
Yeah, look, that's a question for Susan. I haven't spoken to Susan about that, but I think what she would welcome is Andrew and our party having a robust debate that Labor should be having on how do we actually reduce emissions and reduce energy. Because, look, I'll give Labor this. They're great at playing politics. To your point, the discussion is about us right now, not about Labor. And, look, I'm new to politics. I only joined 18 months ago. I'm more about facts, science, economics, but I have to give it to them. They've made this debate about us, and look, maybe we've played into that. But what I would say,
I think these were comments made by your colleagues of their own accord. They weren't forced into making those comments by the government. They chose, in the case of Andrew Hastie, in the case of John O'Doniam, in the case of Tony Passin, they chose to make those comments themselves.
But what the government is doing is having a debate about a 2050 target, which those comments, for those on my side, were talking about. They're not talking about the policies. The game is actually the next 10 years. What's happening in Australia right now, Sarah, is we have Labor premiers subsidising coal to extend it. The Labor premiers are living the reality of Chris Bowen's fantasy. What we really should be doing is saying, let's look at now between 2035. Right now you have Chris Minns spending up to $225 million a year to extend Eraring beyond its closure date. You have just for the sake of our viewers, I should point out that's a coal-fired power station in New South Wales. But let me ask you this question: how long do you think you're asking your party or the audience and voters to focus on the nearer targets, not the 2050 target, but it's your colleagues that have put the 2050 target at the centre of the debate. How long
can the Liberal Party, how long can the coalition wait to settle this issue?
Look, answer your question very directly. I think we need to settle our energy policy sooner rather than later. That's my view. But
what does sooner rather than later mean, Simon Kennedy? Sorry. What does that mean
in the
for you?
2035, we need to land a position on 2035, which you just said Labor's about to legislate a 2035 target. The Business Council of Australia said they're on track to, at best, hit 50 on current course and speed. They're talking about a target of 65, 70 or 75% with no idea how they're going to hit it, while Labor premiers are out there extending coal. Labor is extending coal in Eraring and also looking at it in Yallourn. So we're trusting somebody to do that. We need to land a position, to answer your question very directly, sooner rather than later on that. And just on the earlier preposition, it's us talking about 2050. Well, they just released an alarmist report. Tony Wood from the Grattan Institute, very centre of the road, reasonable person, Tony, said, look, these are alarmist reports. We can't really tell what's going to happen there. So they are playing this politics about 2050 because they will do anything to avoid the disaster that's hitting Australian industry.
Let me just ask you a question. Let me just ask you a question
Sure.
about your party and in particular about your predecessor in the seat of Cook, which you won after Scott Morrison left politics. It was the Liberal Party that formulated that policy, their support, the coalition's support of the net zero 2050 target. Peter Dutton kept it in place. It's only now that it's broken out into the open. What's changed?
Oh, look, there was a debate back when Scott Morrison landed the target. We've always had debates because we have robust debates to make sure we land on that position. At that time, it was very
Simon
controversial.
Kennedy, well, yes, but it was carried out largely within the party room and the policy was eventually agreed on.
No, there was public debate at that time. I remember it because I was in another role. I wasn't in politics, but I was advising on it. I remember the Nationals speaking out on this topic at the time. And it's a debate the Labor Party and Australia should be having. Again, in politics, we need to be having these uncomfortable debates. When energy prices are up 40%, when the CEO of BHP says our energy costs 2 to 3 times more than our competitors, if we're not debating this at this time, we're going to drive this country off an economic cliff. And I think that's what Andrew's responding to.
Let me just ask you a final question, if I may, Simon Kennedy. Sorry to speak over you, but how do
Sure.
you think the electorate would respond to the Liberal Party making a decision now to drop the 2050 target? Just briefly, if you would.
Oh, look, we have not made that decision. I know, what does the Liberal Party agree on? We agree that actually this train wreck of an economic and energy policy that Chris Bowen is driving is unachievable.
Question was about you and the
debate.
electorate. Question was about Liberals and the electorate.
But it was about a hypothetical policy that we haven't. I'm not here to hypothecate on our policy. I believe it's a target we should keep. It's an admirable target. But what's much more important is it's not a policy. It is not a policy. What we need to talk about is how do we create an energy abundance? We are in the top uranium resources in the world, the top 10 in coal and gas, the best wind and solar, yet we've gone from the 5 cheapest countries in energy in the OECD to the 5 most expensive. Why are we not talking about this? Why are we not talking about Labor premiers paying to extend coal?
You're not allowed to repeat that one again?
Unfortunately, yes, we are talking about our party.
Yep. Sorry to run you over there, Simon. You repeated Eraring and Victoria, so that gave you my opportunity. We're very glad to have you on the programme, and as I said, congratulations on your appointment. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for chatting.